Good morning. I'm Dan Scaff of Radical Impact Partners and a trustee of the Latino Community Foundation. I'm really happy to be here to introduce you to an exceptional leader and our next keynote speaker, Jacqueline Martinez Garcel. Before I do that, let me share a few thoughts with you. 39.6% of Californians are Latino, 15 million strong. Thank you. We control $320 billion of annual consumer spending and represent the largest voting bloc in the state. 54% of California school children are Latino, and by some estimates, 80% of the workforce will be Latino by 2050. Sadly, 30% of Latino children live in poverty, and only about 1% of philanthropic dollars go to Latino communities and causes. I know we're all distressed, really more like horrified, by the inequitable policies coming out of Washington. Can you imagine the impact if Latinos, Indigenous people, and all marginalized communities were to raise our voices for the common good? This is the aim of the Latino Community Foundation. Let's take a look.
Imagine, what if all Latinos in California graduated from college? What if all 7 million eligible Latinos voted in our elections? What if all 15 million Latinos united to advance justice? Do you want to live in that California? We do. The Latino Community Foundation is on a mission to unleash the power of Latinos. LCF has built the largest network of Latino philanthropists in the country. The Latino Giving Circle Network is now a movement of 500 members in 15 giving circles statewide. And we will not stop until all Latinos are invited to pay it forward. LCF launched the first ever Latino nonprofit accelerator, the groundbreaking incubator that unleashes the power and impact of grassroots nonprofits. And we will not stop until Latino-led nonprofits have the resources they need to achieve social justice. LCF organized the first televised gubernatorial forum focused on issues that matter most to Latinos, and led legislative visits because our voice and our vote matter. And we will not stop until Latinos get a seat at the table. At LCF, it's not just what we do, but how we do it that matters. We put love, we put culture, and we put people at the center of our work. That's what drives us. People like you and me. Because we are the leaders we've been waiting for. Now it's time to stop imagining and to start building a just California for all. Join us. Together, we are unstoppable.
Thank you. Jacqueline Martinez came to us from the New York State Health Foundation. She brings deep experience and passion for improving health and care of vulnerable populations, and she also brings degrees from Columbia and Cornell universities. Over the past 3 years, Jacqueline and the extraordinary team at LCF have partnered with over 150 organizations and an ever-growing group of proud Latino Giving Circle members to transform communities into places where Latinos, immigrants, and marginalized families can thrive. LCF campaigns have reached over 8 million voters, and the organization has granted over $5 million to advance health, civic, and economic opportunity for nearly 250,000 Latinos, and we're just getting started. I'm very proud to introduce you to our leader, Jacqueline Martinez.
Thank you, Dan, for that really beautiful introduction. I was standing behind the scene and crying watching that video again because it just moves me to my core. Dan, it's because of leaders like you and Michelle Scaff that I am here today. The talent that we have in this state that's grounded in Latino values and the power of love and change and family is why this organization exists. I want to take you through a journey today, though, and tell you why power, why love, and why unleash. Dan started by reminding all of us today that in California, there are 15 million Latinos. We make up 39% of the population. Yeah, I love the fact that you guys were all clapping around. You ladies and you men were clapping about that. I was excited because we, as a state, represent what this nation will look like. And if we begin to invest in the beauty and the talent and the richness of this culture, California will really meet its potential and the ideals that we all look up to. But right now, we're living in a reality that's all too painful for all of us. On June 14th, the New York Times had this picture in their front cover. It's a picture that for me pierced not only our hearts and our mind, but also penetrated the soul of this nation and demanded that we ask ourselves, who will we become? Will we actually live up to the ideals that were set forth 242 years ago? It's in a democracy that's still in its experimental stages, honestly. I just came back from Costa Rica meeting with students from Nicaragua who are leading a revolution in their country, trying to take back their democracy. And I dare to say to them, we are experiencing the same thing in our country right now. But these images and the numbers are painful. They are painful because they are happening in a state that claims to have strong progressive values for our future. And yet, if you look at the central part of our state, there are raids going on, there are hate crimes going on against our elderly or against our children, families being separated. I know all of you are very well aware of that reality right now. But that is the context in which I want to ground this talk in. We also face the fact that the institutions that were supposedly set up to protect and defend are killing our fathers, our brothers, our sons, and yes, even our daughters. 41% of police shootings are of Black and Latino men and women, and more than half of those shootings have been of people who've been unarmed. And if we're not dying in the streets because of a bullet, we're being put behind bars in numbers that are just too far gone for a country that's supposed to be democratic, industrialized country, modern, and we're locking up our men in prison, leaving our children fatherless in our communities. And all of this, by the way, these numbers have taken place in the last 12 months. And in September, October, and November, and I'm bringing this up because right now we just commemorated Hurricane Maria with a group of Puerto Rican leaders here in California. But it's a painful time because in less than 18 days between September 20th and October 7th, 4,000 people lost their lives between Hurricane Maria, the earthquake in Mexico, and the North Cal wildfires. And over 70,000 people were displaced who have yet to find a home. It is in this context that we're also experiencing a breakdown of the institutions that were set up to protect our democracy. Corporate dollars have penetrated our voting, and our voices seem like they matter less and less. But yet, the Latino Community Foundation is convicted, and I am convinced that the only way out, and I know that the theme of this conference is a path forward, the only way out is if we stick to love and to hope. It is the only thing. It is the only thing that will not only undo what we're experiencing as a country, as a world right now, but it will propel us forward in a way that we will build institutions that matter to the people who are hurting most. So before I get into this why love and hope, I'm taking a big risk today, something that I don't necessarily do in crowds this big. I'm going to share a small piece of myself, because like I shared with my team yesterday, for me to do this talk and remain grounded and authentic and true to myself, I have to share with you some truth and principles by which I wake up every morning and I ground myself in. And it's this one, 1 John 4:8. God is love. It's a truth that I learned at a really young age. In family dinners, we talked about this. And it's a truth that I held on to when I saw cousins of mine lose their lives to a crack epidemic in Washington Heights. It's a truth that I held on when I saw cousins of mine suffer from HIV/AIDS in hospitals. It's a truth that I held on when I saw my family being separated because of immigration laws that weren't just and right. And this truth is founded on a movement 2,000 years ago that believes that the creator of the universe sent his only begotten son, was motivated for love for a broken and decaying world, to bring about salvation because of love, through love, and only because of love. These words are still core to the Christian faith. And I understand there are a lot of imperfect, evil people who claim this title. As in many movements, many have lost their way. But I want to repeat these words from 1 Corinthians. If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains, but I do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all that I have to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. And these three remain: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. It's a verse that's been repeated in weddings, sometimes really meant, sometimes just repeated for the sake because they sound good. But these are the founding principles by which we are trying to build a revolution in California with Latinos on the hedge, leading from a place of love and power. It is a truth that has guided four of my heroes in the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King says, I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality. This is why right temporarily defeated is stronger than evil triumphant. Cesar Chavez reminded us that there is enough love and goodwill in our movement to keep giving energy to our struggle and still have plenty left over to break down and change the climate of hate and fear around us. My favorite poet, Maya Angelou, love recognizes no barriers. It jumps hurdles, leaps fences, penetrates walls to arrive at its destination full of hope. Grace Lee Boggs, when speaking about her husband, reminded us that revolutions are made out of love for people and for place. He often talked about loving America enough to change it. I love this country, he used to say, not only because my ancestors' blood is in the soil, but because of what I believe it can become. If we don't hold on to that love of country for what it can become, we will lose our way and become what we are critical of our enemy has already become. You heard from our video that we have built the largest network of Latino philanthropists. I am proud of that. But what I am most proud of is that these women and these men and these youth are building this movement out of a place of love and building up their power out of that inner strength that they have found in their moments of pain and found purpose in that pain to build out their love. I'm not looking for building a movement of people who are writing checks and feeling good about themselves. I am done with charity. We should all be done with charity. This country has too often lifted up philanthropy as this thing that the wealthy are giving to the poor and therefore should feel good about ourselves. Well, I also want to remind ourselves, and I'll come back to these slides, that when philanthropy was started, Kellogg, Ford, Rockefeller, right? You know these names really well. Today, they still represent a majority. 72% of board members in philanthropy are white. What drove them to start foundation was, in fact, the fact that they were trying to not pay certain taxes. When FDR settled taxes in 1936, Ford put aside $25,000. It is now one of the largest foundations in the world. But what we're trying to change is the face of philanthropy, the purpose of philanthropy, and the heart of philanthropy. Latinos are, yes, the future workforce. We are also the future philanthropists, and we can build something different. Philanthropy for far too long has benefited from capitalism and created some of the conditions by which we're now trying to put 5% to solve. What we're trying to do at the Latino Community Foundation is actually unleash capital for social movement by everyday people. Yeah, I want you to clap about that. This is something new. It's different. Giving circles are not new to this country. In fact, I have learned from some incredible Jewish women in New York who have established these giving circles. And this is not about holding money, collecting interest, and growing funds. It is not about writing a check once a year to say, wow, I gave to this organization. I should feel so good about myself. This is about liberating the capital that belongs to the people to begin with, that needs to undo the systems that have oppressed and robbed people of their fullest potential. That's why when we go up and down this state, whether it's Latinos in the technology sector, Latinos in the banking sector, Latinos in the nonprofit sector, we're saying to them, you have the power to change this, and it comes with your time, your talent, and your treasures. And your time, because we don't want you just to come once a year and fill out a check. We want you to sit on the boards. We want you to work with these community partners. We want you to open up doors of opportunity. Because if you're working at Google, you're sitting in a place of privilege, and they know that. And they come from homes where their parents have taught them to pay it forward. And so let's harness that power for this country, for the good of our communities. And then the question is, well, who do we invest in? And who decides who do we invest in? Well, the Latino Community Foundation, like Dan just said, has made a commitment to invest in Latino-led organization. And the reason why is because we believe that those closest to the pain have the best solutions that will last the longest and actually transform the lives of a whole generation. Let me tell you about Sammy Nunez. Sammy Nunez was expelled from school when he was 15 years old. At 18, he was shot in the chest but survived. 9 months later, he retaliates. He ends up in prison for 9 years. During those 9 years, Sammy dedicates himself to educate himself to ground himself in prison in a movement called La Cultura Cura, which means I will tap into my ancestral power to heal this pain, understanding that hurt people hurt more people, and I want to heal that hurt before I go back out into my community. Today, Sammy leads one of the most important organizations in Stockton. I love Mayor Michael Tubbs. We've spent afternoons talking together. We've had dinners together with him. But Michael Tubbs knows that it's because of the leadership of people like Sammy Nunez and Pastor Trina, who have worked in this community, who have healed their own pain and are looking to heal the pain of others, who've been through the same systems and the same oppression that they've experienced, to lift them up and not to just put them through a GED program or a job, but to remind people that success without significance doesn't mean anything. That we don't need just jobs, we need jobs with dignity. They are working to build up the advocates that are spending time in DC fighting for these changes for Stockton. And now everyone is paying attention to what's happening there. And Sammy, for the last 30 years, has been building this movement of these men who are rooted in understanding that healed people heal people, and a healed community heals a nation. Today, this organization now runs a trauma center. The state finally opened up their eyes and said, wow, there's something happening here. When we started working with Sammy, their budget was less than $100,000, mostly volunteers, mostly men coming out of the criminal justice system. And I say criminal justice system, but there's really no justice in that system. However, these men have come out looking for a place where they can turn their pain into purpose and use love to heal. And now the state is funding this healing, this trauma center on these cultural values. This is Jacqueline Martinez, son of a Mexican immigrant. Dad signs up to go and joins the military, fights in Vietnam, comes back. Life is a little bit let's just say that it was a lot of uprooting, moving from South LA to Texas. Somewhere along the way, Jacob understands that he's been given a door. A door has been opened for him, and now he wants to open it for others. He comes back to Watsonville, California. How many of you have been there? This is where our strawberries come from, ladies and gentlemen. This is where Jacob established an organization called Digital Nest. It's a nest for the sons and daughters of our farm workers to find a place where they can dream bigger, where they can ground themselves deeper in the roots of this land that they have cultivated and their ancestors have cultivated, but to find a greater place for themselves. And this is not about training the next workers for Google or Pandora or Apple. Those companies are great, and we're grateful for the doors that are opening. But what we are really grateful for is that these young people are working with the small businesses in Watsonville to lend their expertise, to do digital marketing, to do analytical with their web technology, to use what they're learning and replanting it back into Watsonville and now Salinas. These young people are not saying, okay, I got this now, I can move on. They're staying there and grounding themselves there. We are funding organizations like Community Coalition. I hope many of you will stay for tomorrow's night dinner. You're going to meet Edna Chavez. This young lady witnessed her brother being murdered in South LA. They were walking home from school. Yet in her pain, she found the strength to find purpose and now has become a leader in this movement for March for Our Lives. She is holding on to love and to hope, understanding that the loss of her brother's life cannot be in vain. That South LA has to be viewed differently and lifted up differently. And that's why we invest in these leaders and in these organizations. In North Cal, we selected 3 organizations whose sole purpose right now is not just to rebuild Sonoma and Napa, but to reimagine it as a just and inclusive place where our vineyard workers and our hospitality workers actually have a place that they can call home. where their wages will afford their children an opportunity to go to school. They are fighting for that because to rebuild Napa and Sonoma the way it was is not good enough. And they're dedicated to changing it. But I know, and I know many of you know who have grown up in poor neighborhoods, that money is not enough. Poverty is not just solved by money. Poverty is not just a lack of money, it is a lack of opportunity. And the nonprofit accelerator that we've established is about taking these organizations that I've just mentioned to you and giving them a home where their leadership can be unleashed, where the doors of opportunity can be opened wide open for them. One of those organizations that I shared with you about, La Luz, finally convinced Tipping Point, give them $3 million to do a micro-lending program. These women who have worked the fields have bigger dreams. They just need a little bit of opportunity and money to actually make them happen. Standing with these organizations, their ideas and their visions is what's going to take us to the California that we all hope for. And like the video reminded us, it's just not what we do, but how we do it. Every celebration, our Giving Circle meetings, and I can see you, Michelle, in the audience. We have our wine, we have our dinner, we have our music, we bring in our culture, we celebrate. And people want to be part of that celebration even now when our hearts are hurting. Dan said these numbers. The power of all of this is that if we harness this and we unleash this, the state of California can look really different 10, 15 years from now. And when we think about our civic and political power, every 32nd, a Latino turns 18 and becomes eligible to vote. Latino millennials make up 40% of all millennial vote. Imagine if we actually invested in them and in the infrastructure of these organizations that will harness their political power and have Edna Chavez not just vote, but become the next city council, the next school board board member, to have Latinos sit at the table of water boards and decide how water will be used in their community. There are days that we go home and we cry really hard because the political climate that we are living in hurts. But we are committed to this mission because we know it can change the future.
And one of the great problems of history is that the concepts of love and power have usually been contrasted as opposites, polar opposites. So that love is identified with a resignation of power and power with a denial of love. Now, we got to get this thing right. What is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and that love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best. Power at its best is love, implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is love correcting everything that stands against love.